You're trying to create a dynamic, innovating culture within your organization. And the ideal outcome is that innovation is not just the preserve of the corner office elite. Instead, everybody gets involved. Your thinking men and women across the institution at every level are noticing things, asking questions about things, and championing new ideas. Now here's the problem. With most leadership figures that I've spoken to, people who are very open to having their staff take risks, try new things, and innovate, they find that fear is the number one thing that gets in the way. Even when they encourage their staff to take risks, the staff don't know what to do about that. So what is that fear? Well, fear generally is the brain approaching a new, stressful and confusing scenario without a corresponding program. In other words, it doesn't know what to do next. And for that reason, we tend not to use our initiative, we tend not to see opportunities. So how do we address that fear? Well, I believe in very simple thought exercises by which you can instill a program. Here's the key, of course. You've got to instill the thought program prior to the stressful scenario. So it's no good waiting until the scenario arrives and then trying to tell your people what to do. Instead, you want to instill the program, the idea, so that it is preloaded. When they arrive at the stressful situation, the program's already there. Now, I use the term program, but that's actually perhaps a lot grander than what it really is. It is a simple framework by which to react to a new scenario. The Navy SEALs use something like this. When you are in a stressful situation, you must stop, breathe, evaluate, act. That's it. That's the entire framework. But under incredible duress, under great stress and trauma, that simple framework can be enough to save lives. There's something to fall back on, something to call upon to guide the mind through that fear situation. Now, we can do exactly the same thing in terms of innovation, but we have to preload the program before the scenario arrives. And we can go one step further than a simple program. If we want to innovate, we preload questions. Questions are the heart and soul of innovation. Whenever I speak and present on innovation, whenever I train and coach on it, I always say the master key, the cheat sheet is this. If you ask a different question, you will get a different answer. If you go into a scenario with a different question in your mind, you will see things that you didn't notice before. So, in terms of helping your terrified employees to become more innovative, to take more risks and so forth, here's how you address both the fear and their question, how? How do I do that? You tell them to preload their minds with interesting questions. Before that sales meeting, preload a different question so that you look at it differently. Before that board meeting, before meeting with that client, go in with a specific question in mind. Now, of course, the questions can be absolutely anything. They need merely spur creative thinking. But I'll give you a couple of examples of good ones. You might, for example, preload the question, why is this so slow? Now, generally, we would suffer through a slow scenario, whether it's a meeting, a process, assisting a customer, whatever the case might be. But if you've preloaded that question, why is this so slow? You are going to be painfully aware of the foregrounded information about that process. You're going to see things about why it is so slow. And each of those things could represent an opportunity to innovate. Another very good question to ask is, what's awful about us? That is a staggeringly good question in terms of innovation. As you go through a client meeting, a process, whatever the case might be, preload the question, what's awful about us in this situation? Or what's awful about our industry in this situation? And by preloading that question, your radar will pick up things that you didn't consciously notice before. Two more good examples of questions. One is to ask, how could this be 10 times better? Now notice not 10% better. If you ask the question, how could this be slightly better? You will get incremental answers. You'll tinker with existing systems. But if you pose the much bigger, broader, zoom back question, how could this be 10 times better? You're going to have to look at it in a completely different way. One of my favorite questions of all, and it's a little science fiction-y, it's very much of a philosophical thought experiment, is to ask, how would this look on the Starship Enterprise? Now bear with me, there's sound business value in this one. If you, for example, want to go out and order a meal, there are certain steps that you have to go through. You've got to call a restaurant and make a booking, get into traffic and drive there, Find parking, take your seat, scan the menu, step, 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 before your food arrives. How would it go on the Starship Enterprise? Well, Kirk might say, computer, Merlot, and a rare steak. Instantly done. What we've done there is we've said, if you could take the steps out of the process, what would ideal end usage look like? And very often we are so fixated on the steps, on the way it has always been done, that we actually lose sight of what ideal end usage is and how much better it could be. Radical disruptors, the men and women who change their entire industries, are more focused on ideal end usage than they are on the way things have always been done. So, in order to help your staff overcome their own fear of trying, of change, of experimenting, of new ideas, preload them with this question. Before you go into a stressful scenario, how can you think about it differently? What can you notice this time around that you didn't notice before? Let them come up with their own questions or provide the questions yourself. Questions are the heart and soul of innovation. Ask a different question and you will see your world differently.